evacuation. In other cities around the world, people are voluntarily evacuating population centers.
Something happening here.
Truth Connections.
You're listening to this.
Hello, hello. This is hello, hello. Got a little reverb, so I'm going to keep talking until it goes away. Check, check, check. Joe, I got echo. God. Hello, hello. Okay. Hello, hello. This is Katherine Buckalew, and you are listening to Truth Connections Radio, broadcasting from UPRN 107.7 FM, the Paranormal Radio Network, and truthconnections.com. Thank you all very much for being here. Please feel free to join our Facebook page or sign up for our YouTube channel. Both are called Truth Connections. Tonight, Truth Connections has their original co-host back to share the mic with me, and I'm going to introduce him now. His name is Rand Porter. Welcome back to the show, Rand.
Hey, Kathy. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, what have you been up to?
Well, there's kind of a lot going on out here in Las Vegas. Lately, I've been working with Sean Brown on the Delphi Amphitheater property that he has, 100 acres on the south side of Las Vegas. He's going to do a permanent festival site and do all sorts of spiritual festivals out there. So, and we're prepping the property, and we got something going on next week. So that's amazing. I'm also working with a woman who is really spearheading a whole wild horse sanctuary thing out here in Nevada and Northern California, because it turns out a lot of the wild horses are being rounded up and slaughtered. So
horrible.
So yeah, just a lot of really interesting things to get involved in and make a difference. So I'm just blessed to be a part of them. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime. It's nice to have you back. I just want to let the audience know it is in no way that, Rand wasn't working with the show anymore. It's just that he became too busy to be here week after week, and he's got a liking to Courtney Brown's information and his research, so I invited him back on tonight with us. And very pleased you're back with us. Thank you, Rand.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all the new information that Courtney has to share.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. Now, I know that you live in Vegas, so you have access to all the cool fringe tech. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, I actually do get to play with some interesting stuff. It's kind of cool. Area 51 is just right up the road a bit, so and most of the workers who work there live here, so sooner or later you're going to bump into someone who whispers about this or that. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
A lot going on.
Absolutely. Let's go on with the show, shall we?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. First, I'd like to begin by saying Russell Targ stated in his book, Limitless Mind, A Guide to Remote Viewing and Transformation of Consciousness, he said, we know from the experimental data of psi research that the viewer in the laboratory can focus his or her attention anywhere on the planet and about two-thirds of the time describe what is there. Tonight's guest is Courtney Brown. Courtney is the director and founder of the Far Sight Institute, which is a nonprofit research and educational organization dedicated to studying a phenomenon of non-local consciousness known as remote viewing. Remote viewing is the mental ability to perceive and describe places, persons, at distant locations in the past, present, and future. Courtney is an author, artist, musician, and a mathematician who teaches political science at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. He received his PhD from Washington University. At this moment, he is the leading scholar in the field of remote viewing, as is done using the procedures that were derived by the U.S. military and used for espionage purposes. Courtney is here this evening to discuss the results of a very fascinating study they just did about the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Please help me welcome Courtney Brown to the show. Welcome, Courtney.
Kathy and Rand, I want to thank you so much for inviting me back to the show, and I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back.
Too. Absolutely. Courtney, I know you haven't been at this particular network before. This is your third time on Truth Connections, but would you mind telling the listening audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm the director of the Farsight Institute, and that's FARSIGHT. That's like seeing far, .org, because we're a nonprofit. And I'm also a university professor, but I do not do any of the remote viewing research at the university. There I'm a mathematician, work in applied mathematics and a social science program. But the Farsight Institute is the absolute leading, I can actually say that without any ambiguity, because we're the only major science venue where these full-blown studies, public studies of remote viewing using these military or military-derived methodologies are done. And it's we have a huge amount of information on our website about remote viewing, and we work with the absolute best remote viewers on the planet. For those of you who may be new to the remote viewing field, or new to remote viewing in general, understand that it's a method of transferring perceptual information across time and space. Now, this is in complete violation to the laws of physics, relativistic and classical physics, because you're transferring information literally instantly across space, and you're also transferring information across time, and that simply can't be done with mainstream physics. But you have to understand that mainstream physics, the paradigms of mainstream physics, are 100 years old. They're literally a century old, because if you're talking about, well, classical physics, you're going back to Newton, but with relativistic physics, you're talking about the special and general relativity theories. And seriously, there's been no, even in terms of quantum mechanics, there's been no fundamental changes in the paradigms of quantum mechanics or relativistic physics for 100 years. So the stuff that you're getting in the universities about those two things are very, very, very dated. Now, there have been lots of advances in the technical stuff, in the smaller problems. For example, we do quantum computing now. We know how to do all the relativistic calculations routinely. So this is all good, but in terms of the major paradigms, the major big questions, everything's 100 years old. So the fact that we can transfer perceptual information across time and space is not really that surprising, given the fact that the paradigms that mainstream physics works with are so old. But on the other hand, the theories from physics of how this can actually be done have actually been around for a while, and they date back historically to 1957, when Hugh Everett did his dissertation under John Wheeler at Princeton, and he basically reinterpreted the two-slit experiment. It's a famous quantum mechanical experiment that every first-year graduate student in physics does in the lab, and it has never been fully understood, and to this day you'll have really great luminaries in physics tell you that it's still a mystery. But a theory was developed in 1957 called the other worlds interpretation, in which the existence of other realities, parallel universes, the past, present, and future, everything happens simultaneously with our own. And it was widely laughed at in that day. And in fact, Hugh Everett, who developed the theory, was so disgusted by the way he was ridiculed, he left physics entirely and went to work with the Defense Department and was the pioneer architect for the nuclear program that was called Mutually Assured Destruction, or MAD, but that actually saved all of our lives, because at that time we had people in the civilian realm and the military, the very top people. There were some people that were arguing forcefully in favor of a first strike against the Soviet Union and China, and it was Hugh Everett with his mutually assured destruction theory that basically stopped that, because he said, we're not going to survive a first strike. I mean, everybody's going to die. And then he said, the only way to do this is for us to put missiles up and point them at the Soviet Union and China, and let them have their missiles and point them at us, and nobody will fire because everybody will die. And that saved our butts. Anyway, but at this particular time, about 18% of mainstream physicists have adopted Hugh Everett's worldview in his interpretation, which is essentially a generalization of quantum mechanics to the macro level. And that's a lot, 18%. That still means 82% are interpreting physics as it was developed 100 years ago. But 18% is good, and those 18% tend to be younger people, and the 82% tend to be older people. So we're seeing a generational replacement. So the physics about why remote viewing works actually does have a reasonable following, and it is growing. Now, this does disturb physicists, mainstream physicists, a lot, because they do not differentiate between, well, they do not differentiate between the transfer of information and the transfer of energy or matter. Because, you see, information, as far as physicists is concerned, is energy. For example, if you take, for the physicist, anything that is organized has information. For example, if you have some type of subatomic system within a sealed, some type of subatomic or atomic organization of anything within a sealed environment that's sealed from the outside, and you let that organization dissipate, so you get randomness, you let entropy take its course, you get the release of energy. So information actually contains energy. That's not in dispute. And energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, equals mc squared. So energy and mass are the same. So when you're talking about transferring information across time and space, you're talking about transferring energy, which is the same as transferring mass across time and space. So that really disturbs a lot of mainstream physicists. But nonetheless, we are in fact, understanding this better. And the remote viewing phenomenon, we now understand very well how this works, and we have been using this for scientific investigations as well as operational or exploratory projects, such as the most recent, the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was an eye-opener even for me.
Wow. In the chat room, someone is asking what the difference is between remote viewing and astral projection. I think it's a very good question.
Well, remote viewing is a structured method of data collection using perception, psychic perception you might call it. But astral projection, or just simply using psychic things, is not. It's an intuitive, natural, feel your way through it type of process. So with remote viewing, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to go along with it. The first thing is that the targets, or the things that the remote viewers are supposed to be perceiving, has to be completely blind to the remote viewers, meaning the remote viewers cannot be told anything about what there is they're supposed to be perceiving. At the Farsight Institute, we give them a non-leading email that says there is a target, go remote view it, please send us a session, goodbye. That's it. And from there, they just walk into a room, close the door, go to a table, paper and pen, and an hour later come out with 20 pages of perceptual data that exactly describes that target. So that's how it's done. With astral projection, you're not doing that. You're telling your mind, okay, now I'm going to go out there and do this, X, Y, Z. You can't do that with remote viewing. You have to have no knowledge of what you're doing for that to be done. In addition, with remote viewing, we use structured data collection procedures, which are things that they do one after the next, a very clear process. However, let me say this much. Remote viewing up until now has not made a significant dent in the world population. Meaning there's lots of people now know the words remote viewing, and there's a lot of people that see it referenced on television and movies and so on. But in terms of the big time, it's really not made a dent. And part of the problem has always been that the remote viewing procedures are tied to the methods that were developed by the United States military, which are fundamentally pen and paper. And they involve a lot of arcane things that happen, such as doodles on paper and special vocabulary and structured ways of writing things. And unless you actually know something about the procedures, it's really hard for the normal person to compare remote viewing data with the so-called target, or the thing they were supposed to be perceiving, to see if everything matches up, to see if the descriptions are in fact exactly like what the so-called target is. However, for this latest project we did the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's important, hugely significant, for two major reasons. First, of course, is the findings we found out with respect to the pyramid. But perhaps even more important is the way the remote viewing was done. We took the two best remote viewers on the planet, arguably, Daz Smith and Dick Algar, and they retrained independently to be able to do their remote viewing sessions live on video. Now, this is important, in an entertaining manner, in a theatrically entertaining manner, a theatrically interesting manner. So it's not just that they were doing their procedures, but they were doing them live on video, and you do not have to know anything about the remote viewing methodologies to follow along what they're doing. And the descriptions, the clear descriptions, are so good, it is as if, it is no worse than if they were there with their own physical eyes witnessing everything. In addition, the procedures are done, or the remote viewing is done standing up, live on video, in front of whiteboards, in an animated fashion, meaning they're looking into the camera, they're making, good facial movements, they're describing things. And when they describe the targets, they are incredibly good. For example, when Dick Algar describes the Great Pyramid of Giza, we're not talking doodles. He's drawing the pyramid exactly, and he calls it, this is the pyramid. And you can't walk away from the results and say, oh, I don't know if remote viewing is real. I mean, any reasonable person can't say that, because you actually see the remote viewers draw those pictures and describe them live right in front of you.
Body language, their energy, the whole thing. It's very
believable.
believable.
The whole thing. And you say, the only thing that you can do is you have your jaw drop and say, oh my, OMG, oh my gosh, this is real.
I thought it was amazing. I have to tell you, Courtney, I was really impressed.
Yeah, Catherine, you saw the documentary.
And so did Rand.
So did Rand. It was a big deal to be able to do that. So this is now the new standard for how remote viewing is done, at least here at the Farsight Institute. And if you look at how it was done in the past, both here at the Institute and with respect to, other people who do remote viewing out there, that pen and paper stuff, you can do it till death takes all of us, and it's just not going to change the world. You have to be able to leave the rigidity of the military methods and adapt and do it in a way that's transportable in the multimedia age. I mean, every teenager in the world looks at YouTube, and you just can't expect people just to look at stuff that has a basis in technologies that were around in the 1970s and 80s with pen and paper. You have to be able to adapt and to make it convincing. People want to see it done, and they don't want to watch pen and paper. They want to watch a person and describe it. And the descriptions have to be so good that it's no worse than if the person was actually there and witnessed it with their own eyes. At times
I felt like I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing. It's an absolutely new standard, and that's what we're using on all projects moving forward. And we're going to continue to innovate and try new things, but that's, like, for example, eventually we won't be using whiteboards. We'll be using plexiglass, sort of glowing plexiglass, and they'll be writing on it, so we'll be able to video record it from both sides. So you can actually see the remote viewer through the plexiglass while she or he is actually recording and doing this. But, that's stuff for the future. But nonetheless, this is it. It's an interesting phenomenon. We're actually approaching the quality of the data that you got with, say, Minority Report, starring Tom Cruise, where they had these psychics in a pool and they were hardwired up to the computer system that was projecting the mental images onto a screen. Well, we don't do it that way, of course, but nonetheless, the very idea of getting good mental images.
I was going to feel sorry for Daz and Dick in a minute, if that's the way you did.
Yeah, it's not that way. But anyway, that is really important, and if for no other reason for somebody to watch the full documentary, just to see that alone is worth the time and effort to see it, because. Yeah. Oh, by the way, this does say something else too. This is something I mentioned in the announcement to the project, to the release of the project, that people in general around the world have been waiting for some type of disclosure with respect to the authorities regarding remote viewing and even extraterrestrial life. And the argument that I was making in the announcement is that simply is illogical. It never, ever happens. Authorities never get involved with disclosure. Part of their authority is the fact that they hold secrets that other people are waiting for them to deal with. And disclosure weakens their authority. So that never, ever happens. So if you're waiting for authorities to tell you what you're allowed to believe, well, you're waiting for Godot. It's just not going to happen. For example, President Obama, just about 3 weeks ago, was the first U.S. president to ever acknowledge publicly that Area 51 exists. Now, for goodness sake, they have tour buses that go past Area 51. They have people...
I think we lost Courtney. Hang on, everyone. Courtney, we're trying to get Courtney back. Hang in there, everyone.
Okay, are we still there?
Just start over again, Courtney.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's in the movies, tour buses. The whole world knows that Area 51 exists. And they've known that for decades. And basically, authorities only acknowledge things, disclose things, when everybody in the world is laughing at them because it's so obvious. Mm-hmm. That's what we're at with respect to Area 51. So if you're waiting for the authorities to make announcements to disclose that remote viewing is real and that extraterrestrials are real, well, you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. So the reason this new documentary and this new method of doing remote viewing is so important is you clearly can see that remote viewing is real, unambiguously. It's on the level of proof, not just convincing, but on the level of proof to any reasonable person, and you no longer have to wait for authorities to tell you anything. You can say, okay, I've seen it, I get it, I understand it now. President Obama and any future presidents, they can wait for as long as they want before they acknowledge it. I at least know what's real because I've seen it with my own eyes. That's an important intellectual hurdle that the 7 billion people on the planet need to get through, and it's now possible to do that because of this new thing. And that's a fundamental component of this new documentary, The Great Pyramid of Giza. It's more important than I think most people realize.
Yes. Before we get into that, Courtney, I'd like to ask a couple of remedial questions for the sake of the audience.
Yeah.
As, let's face it, we're not remote viewers. And they would like to know, can anyone be trained to remote view? Yeah,
the general idea is that anyone can do it. It's in the sense of playing the piano, meaning can anyone learn to play the piano? So anyone can go and learn how to play something on the piano. And if you take some lessons on the piano, or if you go to your niece or nephew or son and daughter and watch them after they've been taking lessons for a year, you'll see them study, they're playing music and they're squinting at the music, at the sheet music, and in fact some songs are coming out, some music is coming out, you're sort of impressed that it sounds like you've got your money's worth out of the lessons. But then when you go to hear Lang Lang play the piano at Carnegie Hall, and he's closing his eyes, he's in a trance, his fingers are moving faster than the speed of light, and the music is swelling out over the entire auditorium, and you say, oh, so that's what it's all about.
He's in the pocket.
I get it. So, so anyone can learn how to do remote viewing, but to get at the level that Daz Smith and Dick Algai are at right now, that's in the pocket stuff. I mean, that's at the level that Lang Lang is in when he plays at Carnegie Hall. So that's a completely different level. And so, yes, anyone can learn it, but if you want to be as good as Daz and Dick, they have put in incredible hours over incredible years to get to where they are now, and they are the best on the planet for that reason. So, yeah, anybody can do it, but, expect the working curve. But nonetheless, anyone can learn the basics and have profound experiences. For example, we offer at the Farsight Institute a free course in SRV, Scientific Remote Viewing. That's 18 hours long, 24 lessons, plus a free printable text. The course is hosted by YouTube, and it's available worldwide. And in China, where YouTube is not accessible, we have it available in Youku, so youku.com. And so it's available worldwide. And, so there's no reason someone couldn't go through the course and learn the basics and convince themselves that, yes, they too can do this thing. Just about everybody who starts remote viewing starts with that course. And it's incredible the number of emails I get saying that they were blown away when they actually had these experiences by themselves. But that's not saying they're at the level of Daz Smith and Dick Algai, but they've at least convinced themselves that the general person can do this. And, of course, if they wanted to go further, people can always go further, just like you can always continue going further with the piano until you're, performing in major venues. But anyway, that's really exciting about this new documentary. You see how this can actually go. By the way, I should say that saying that Dick and Daz are so spectacular does not minimize the quality or the greatness of the earlier remote viewers, the pioneers that were associated with the original programs out at SRI International or Stanford Research Institute, as well as in the military. But you have to understand that every generation produces improvements. And so 20 years from now, there'll be people that are doing remote viewing way better than Daz and Dick. And 20 years from that, there'll be people doing remote viewing with innovations, technical innovations, modernization of procedures that surpasses anything that those people were doing. So it's going to be continual like this. But right now, we're at a point where we're at the top of our game, and we're at a point where we can literally change the planet by people just looking at what's being done. You don't need to know anything about the remote viewing methodologies, the arcane procedures, the notations, the terminology. You can just open your eyes and watch and let your own eyes pop out and jaw drop.
You guys have a lot of free information and trainings at your website. Courtney, what part of the brain is accessed when someone remote views?
People have lots of thoughts about that, and to be quite honest, we don't know. Some people say the left side of the brain. Some people say, but you have to use the right side also. The reality is, we think at least I think you're using all parts of the brain in a coordinated fashion. Meaning there's no one part that's actually using it. Because, for example, Dick Allgaier and Daz Smith are really good at drawing. Daz Smith is, in fact, a professional graphics artist. And so when they do their remote viewing, they're having mental procedures and mental images in their mind. But after they get those mental images, they have to draw them. And, Daz so he uses both parts of the brain, sort of the logical part and the intuitive part, in a coordinated manner. But I think most people, when they ask that question, they're really talking about the perceptual component. But really, when you get to the level of Daz and Dick, you're no longer talking about separate parts. You're talking about an integrated personality, a personality that uses both sides of the brain, the intellect as well as the intuitions, and in a way that there's no fighting anymore. They're working together.
Yes, the brain is working like a symphony.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're not listening just to violins, you're listening to all the other, the cellos and the oboes, you're listening to everything all at once.
I'm guessing that DMT, the frontal cortex, and the amygdala plays an important role.
I'm sure every part of it plays an important role. One of the things that I sort of recommend personally, and I don't know how Dick and Daz feel about all of this, but that I personally think, though, is I stay away from all psychoactive elements completely. That means not just drugs, like marijuana and other drugs, but also wine, beer, and tea and coffee because of the psychoactive elements of caffeine in it. So here you have people like Bill Maher, and I'm really a fan of Bill Maher. I love his show. But he's campaigning so heavily for the legalization of marijuana. And he's a liberal, he's a Democrat, and he's always talking about liberal causes. And I'm sort of finding myself on the liberal side of things as well, but I'm looking at his stuff about the legalization of drugs, and I'm not even weighing in on the legalization of anything. I'm just telling people the best thing you can do is to keep your system as clean as a whistle. I sort of like to think of my brain the way Paul Newman thought of his race cars. Paul Newman, the great actor, he was also a race car driver, and he liked to have his race cars perfect. Every little thing tuned perfectly. That's the way I like to think of my mind. And some people have come up to me at conferences and says, oh, but I was using this mushroom, or I was using this, that, or the other thing, and I had this experience. It's really powerful. You should see it. And I just look at them like they're nuts. It's like taking a finely tuned automobile that has got everything working great and taking a big wrench and throwing it in the engine and getting a big bang out of it and saying, wow, you see, I got a big bang out of it. Look, that was an amazing experience. Did you hear that bang? And I'm just looking and saying, oh, you wrecked the engine. And so I'm sort of in favor of really clean sort of psychology, physiology, the whole thing. Now I know Dick.
You're vegan too, aren't you?
Yes, and Dick is also a vegan. Actually, I'm not completely vegan because I do eat milk products, yogurt, and things like that. And but Dick stays away from all of that completely. So he doesn't even have He doesn't even have milk products. I don't know what Daz does. I don't know what his eating habits are. One of these days I'll ask him.
Now you were telling us a little bit about the procedures that they use. What are the two different procedures that Dick uses and Daz uses?
Well, Daz uses CRV, which is controlled remote viewing, and that's a set of procedures that came out of the Defense Intelligence Agency in an official program that was closed down officially in November of 1995. Everyone that I know and trust believes that the new remote viewing program was started up immediately afterwards and is bigger and better than ever today. And if it ever becomes public, they'll close that one down as well and say, wow, how'd that ever happen? It must have been a rogue general. And they'll start up a brand new one. So that is the controlled remote viewing procedures, and they have a historical link to Ingo Swann, the late Ingo Swann. With regard to Dick Allgaier, he does the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild procedures that were taught to him by Glenn Wheaton. Now, Glenn came out of Special Forces intelligence, and he was involved in what amounts to an unofficial movement within the military that later became known as the 1st Earth Battalion, and that was featured in the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, Jeff Bridges and George Clooney. So that is two different branches, one with an official program and one with an unofficial movement, but they have different procedures, and they're really quite different. And
yes,
so,
someone in the chat room said that Wheaton has his own type of remote viewing.
Well, yeah, the type of remote viewing that Glenn Wheaton taught is the stuff that came out that he was taught in Special Forces intelligence, and he and that has an intellectual heritage that ties back to Dr. Richard Ireland, which is different from Ingo Swann. So you have two different things, two different animals, but nonetheless the procedures are quite comparable in the quality of the remote viewing data that can be obtained. The data when Dick Allgaier gets it and Daz Smith gets it, they both present their data. There's tremendous overlap. I mean, it's very clear they're always talking about the exact same place. And the quality of the data on both of their sides is equal. So it's really amazing. Now, Dick has one special characteristic, Dick Allgaier, is that he was a celebrity newscaster for 30 years in the state of Hawaii. So he's used to talking in front of a camera. Talking in front of a camera is literally what he does. And he's no longer a celebrity newscaster. He unfortunately had a work-related concussion a few years back and had to retire as a celebrity newscaster. It did not affect his remote viewing at all. But nonetheless, he's recovered. But he has still got this penchant for doing everything in front of a camera. He records his own videos, really nice ones, in his own video channels. He uploads them on YouTube, still to this day on a regular basis. And so when he was the first one who pioneered the idea of doing the sessions standing up in front of whiteboards. And when we saw how he was doing it, it was new for all of us. I was looking at him do it, and then Daz watched him do it. And then Daz independently got his own whiteboard and started working on how to do that as well. So, that's how we do things around here. Someone gets an idea and tries it out, and we innovate, and then it becomes a really good idea. And then it becomes a standard that we all have to do, and no one can do anything less. So that's how that works.
I got a quick question, Courtney. Do some remote viewers use binaural beats to maintain a certain brainwave state? Because I noticed it looked like Daz had earphones in. Does he need that to possibly? Are they looking for like a theta or a gamma brainwave state, or is that not really? Yeah,
both Daz and Dick do that. If you look, Daz and Dick both have these earphones in, and they do that. when I do remote viewing, I don't do that. So it's not that it's necessary, but I do find that both Daz and Dick do that, and they are the best on the planet. Now, when I say I don't, I was, I know how to do the remote viewing, of course, but I got fired, essentially, as a remote viewer by the other remote viewers. This is many years back, meaning I was doing these projects and also participating as a viewer, and finally one of the viewers sort of looked at me and said, Courtney, are you going to remote view on this project also? I mean, it's like, are you really going to do that? And I was sort of like saying, well, it's another person. And then the basic idea was, you could read between the lines, you could see, we already know how to do that. Like, why are you messing with what we know how to do? And you should just be doing the chief investigator stuff, designing the targets, designing the projects. We need you to do that. And nobody else can do that. So, like, why are you doing the remote viewing? So it was done very politely, but it was quite clear that the remote viewer said, look, this is what we train to do. We're the best of the best. Just get out of our way and let us do it. While I know how to do the remote viewing, I don't do it. And I just watch from the sidelines and I design the targets. And in fact, the workflows turned out to be much better that way. So I'm the guy who's the chief investigator at the Institute, and they're the guys that actually do the remote viewing. In our previous project, the Atlantis project, Deborah Duggan-Takagi was one of the remote viewers, and she did a spectacular job as well. So anyway, that's what I do. I do the design of the projects, and then what's really interesting about that, however, I have been doing this since the mid-1990s, and to this day, I am still not only the leading, I can say that without even winking, but it's because I'm still the only scholar, the only academic in the anywhere that studies remote viewing as it is done using these military or military-derived methodologies, which is astounding. I mean, it's literally astounding. It's been a long while. My colleagues, I don't know what to say. Are they shy, or are they idiots? I mean, or are they just fearful? I mean, I was talking with John Mack, the late John Mack, before he died, of course, and he was saying, I have no idea. This is soon after the academic inquisition that was being done at Harvard to essentially deny him, take away his tenure. He was the founding member of his Department of Psychiatry, and he's the author of he's the author of sort of the best biography of T.U. Lawrence, won a Pulitzer Prize. So, John Mack was saying, what I don't understand about my colleagues, even though they had tried to get rid of him completely, is after all that effort, why are they still not interested in the subject? Meaning, why are they, they finally stopped the academic inquisition when the dean of Harvard finally closed the book on it and said, let John Mack do whatever he wants. He did that like a week after Alan Dershowitz, the great lawyer, wrote a paper in the local Cambridge, wrote an opinion column in the local Cambridge paper saying that not only John Mack's constitutional rights or freedom of speech were being violated, but elements regarding tenure and the whole thing. So anyway, the dean closed the book. But then later on, John Mack said, but, why is no one else even interested in the subject? He couldn't understand it. And I'm now in that same situation. I'm here. I've been doing this since the mid-1990s, and I'm saying, it's been a long time. What is wrong with my academic colleagues that they're not...
Well, I'll tell you what I think it is, Courtney. I think that not many of those really smart people are balanced in their right and left brain. No offense to anybody, but I think it's a very rare find when someone has the type of accomplishments and scholarly traits that you have that still has a balanced brain. And someone once said about remote viewing, I can't remember who said it, but they said that accessing that type of psi ability is the ultimate form of intelligence. So.
Well, that's a nice compliment, and it's interesting. And who am I to actually to say it? Because I really don't know. It's quite literally a mystery to me. So, but anyway, it could be that what you're saying is that's the real reason for it. So, just don't know. But it's still a mystery to me, because I think this is the most, when I wake up every single day, this is what's on my mind. I mean, I look up every single day, and because this is the greatest thing that consumes my every minute, because this is the point where we're actually changing the way a whole planet thinks about itself, about every single person having a non-physical component that is the actual real them, that their essence does not stop at the surface of their skin. And then the implications of everything that they are in the galaxy relative to the galaxies is there, because then it tells them, that there are other beings all around. So you're opening up not just the person to themselves, but the whole civilization to the galaxy. And there has never been a more fun job by anybody, ever. And I'm just surprised that I'm still the only person doing it. Anyway, but I'm not complaining, because I'm really enjoying the spotlight. I'm really enjoying the fact that I'm in this competitive game to sort of change the entire planet, and the opposition has been taken off the field, and the goalposts are in front of me, and I've been told just to run. I mean, so I enjoy the game. I'm just surprised that there's not more players out here in the field.
Well, maybe there will be in the future. Courtney,
yeah, there will be. Go ahead.
Thank you. I know that this starts off with an email saying there's a target. Is there a certain psychic sender, psychic receiver kind of relationship going on in the beginning stages?
Well, there is no time. We are transferring information across time and space. So clearly the past, present, and future are simultaneous. So you can't say that there's a concurrent link at that time. But basically what happens, there has to be some type of target. And that means there has to be some type of mental understanding of what it is that the remote viewer is supposed to be perceiving. Now, of course, this is not a mental understanding that the remote viewer has, but somebody who is in the chain of command is supposed to have a clear idea of what it is. Now, this is important, Catherine. That does not have to occur before the remote viewing takes place, meaning the remote viewer can do the session first when there is nobody that's ever thought of what the session's supposed to be about. We have done that experiment countless times, and it works like a charm. So you can just say, okay, do a session. And they do a session, and then they wrap it up, and you encrypt it, and you put it up on the web, and you let tens of thousands of people download it. And then you wait a few months for someone who's designated to pick a target. And then that person picks a target, say the Eiffel Tower or something. And then you distribute the password so people can then see what the session looked like a few months earlier. And with good remote viewers, it's spot on. I mean, if it's the Eiffel Tower, you've got it exactly. You've got Paris, the Eiffel Tower, everything. And so it doesn't have to be concurrent, and it doesn't have to be done before the remote viewing. But yes, there has to be some type of mental connection. So that means that telepathy is an actual irreplaceable component of the remote viewing process. You really can't have remote viewing without telepathy. Telepathy and remote viewing really go hand in hand. Meaning the remote viewer is essentially using the thoughts of the person who's designing the target as the key to be able to focus on what is supposed to be perceived. That's what's going on. We've done that test, by the way, many times. And in fact, there was an early procedure that was used to test for the existence of remote viewing. It was an experimental design that was fatally flawed, in which the remote viewers were supposed to perceive one of 5 targets, one being correct and the other 4 being decoys. And then the session would be given to a panel of blind judges who would be looking, blind meaning they weren't told which is the correct target. And they'd be trying to find the best correlation between the remote viewing data and the 5 potential targets. And invariably, you'd find really good descriptions of one of the 5 targets, but it wouldn't be the correct one that was chosen, say, by a computer. It'd be one of the ones that was, say, a decoy. And people actually developed statistical procedures called to account for this, what they called non-independence in the target pool. And they called this the stacking procedure. It was fascinating. The statisticians had a field day over trying to control for this type of procedure. And instead of actually realizing that they had a flawed experimental design with information leakage, they actually tried to control for it statistically, which was so stupid, but that's what they were doing. And we were the ones who actually discovered what was actually going on, that there was an informational leakage in that experimental design, and there was no way to save that experimental design. It could not be improved. It had to be completely tossed out. Because what happened was the judges had all 5 targets on their mind. They were looking at all 5 targets and comparing the data to the 5 targets. And the judges had no idea that that their thoughts were actually creating the targets. So the remote viewer was telepathically connecting with the judges, and the judges had all 5 targets on their brain. So any of the 5 targets were valid choices. So, and the judges never figured that out. So, telepathy is an absolute integral component of the remote viewing process, and it has to be controlled as best as possible when designing these experiments, or the experiment is rubbish and just needs to be thrown away. If you don't understand the telepathic stuff, you don't understand how to control the experiment, and you're going to come in with garbage in, garbage out.
Right. We only have a minute or two before we go to break, but this is a quick question, if you don't mind answering.
Sure.
Don is asking in the chat room, why is remote viewing the future unreliable if past, present, and future are simultaneous?
Yes, that was great.
I.e. not linear.
Actually, let me give a short answer, and if you could come back to that right after the break, it would be good.
Okay.
The reason is that there is no single reality. We did a series of tests for this. This is the basic finding of Hugh Everett that I talked about earlier in 1957 with respect to his interpretation of a quantum mechanical experiment called the two-slit experiment. There is no such thing as a single past, and there's no such thing as a single future. The thing is, when you remote view the past, however, the person who's designing the target knows exactly which past they want. They want the past where, say, the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed, and there it is. When you're remote viewing the future, you don't know which time period you want. You don't know what time stream you want. So that timeline is ambiguous. And so remote viewing the future, you can get anything. So if we can come back to this after the break, I will explain it a bit better.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Okay, Courtney, that sounds good. We're also going to get back in. We're going to get into the topic of your Pardon me. Let me start over. We're also going to go. We are also going to talk about this amazing remote viewing experiment you just did and all the data that surrounds it. It's quite fascinating. I think the audience is going to really dig it when we break it down, and it's pretty amazing. Everyone, I think you're going to really love it. Anyhow, I'm going to do my break announcements. During the break, please feel free to visit our website at www.truthconnections.com. If you are in a position to donate, we would be very grateful. A Facebook friend, Zana Formachikina, just visited Egypt, and she gave me permission to use her photo for the show artwork. So I want to give a shout-out to her and say thank you, Zana. We are grateful that we could use your image of the pyramids. Tonight's break song is by Histrionica. You can find more of their music at Histrionica on Facebook. The song is titled DMT. Enjoy. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Listen to the Church of Mavis radio show, hosted by Jeffrey Pritchett, 11 p.m. Eastern, Saturday nights. Follow your weird and journey into the high strange. Be sure to stop by www.churchofmavisradio.com for upcoming shows, paranormal news, and show archives. That's www.churchofmavisradio.com.
If you are listening to the show and wish to join us in the chat room, visit paltalk.com. Go to the social issues, select Other, and enter the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
The paranormal,
Ghosts,
spirits,
demons,
reincarnation,
past lives,
the afterlife,
divination,
exorcisms,
witchcraft.
the unseen.
He's psychic medium Chris George.
And he's Victor the Voice Furman.
We are Second Sight Radio. Join us live
every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time
on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Whoa! Did you hear?
Listen to the Church of Mavis radio show, hosted by Jeffrey Pritchett.
7
p.m. Eastern,
Friday
nights. Follow your weird and journey into the high strange. Be sure to stop by www.churchofmavisradio.com for upcoming shows, paranormal news, and show archives. That's www.churchofmavisradio.com.
Tune in to The Mind Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We delve into UFOs, abductions, ghosts, aliens, conspiracies, and cryptozoology.
And how could you ever forget about those creepy topics you won't hear on your local news?
This is where I would insert my obligatory skeptical statement. The Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway, mindcemetery.com.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Welcome back. You're listening to Truth Connections with your host, Katherine Buckalew, on UPRN 107.7 FM.
We are back with our very special guest, Mr. Courtney Brown, and my co-host, Rand Porter. Welcome back, guys.
Hey there.
Hey.
I'm here. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. It's a great first hour so far, and like I said, Courtney, we have so much information to get to. We need to run over 15, 20 minutes. Joe usually lets me have that extra time, so don't feel like you're being hurried. We ended that first segment of the show with that question: Why is remote viewing the future unreliable if past, present, and future are simultaneous, i.e. not linear? He says, in other words, time doesn't follow an XYZ progression. Do you want to get back into that?
Yeah, there is no single past, there is no single present, there is no single future. Now, this has been disturbing to mainstream physicists for a very long time, but that was the essential finding, or the essential theoretical argument that Hugh Everett made in 1957, and that's finally being accepted by large numbers of physicists, if not a majority, still large numbers today. And so basically what it is we look at the reality that we see in front of us and see things that we call mass, such as the computer, the car, the house, our own physical bodies, clothing, things like that. And physicists have long assumed that these things are mass, so that they're physical, real things. And that is the big mistake, because physicists, in fact, have never found anything solid ever. For example, you can say, well, I'm looking at my table here, but the table is made up of molecules with all that space in the middle. And inside the molecules, it's just atoms with all the space in the middle. And inside the atoms are subatomic particles. And when you get to the subatomic particles, even then, they break down into other things. And they have never, ever found a solid billiard ball type anything, ever. Period, full stop. In fact, the physicists who are still looking for a solid billiard ball type of thing are called particleists, and they're a dying species. There's hardly any of them left. The only thing that they actually find are frequencies, waves. And these waves combine in processes known as constructive and destructive interference, and they produce something called wave packets. And when we see things like a particle, that emerges from this thing called a wave packet. But the idea is that there actually is no solid thing that interacts. All you have is frequencies interacting. And so what you actually have is a physical brain that acts like a very sophisticated hologram generator. So you have the frequencies that create the reality around us, and the brain sifts out what it's going to let you see. And it has evolutionarily been designed to do that because you need to see the lion that's in front of you today. You do not need to see the gazelle that was there yesterday, nor do you need to see the elephant that will be there tomorrow. To survive, you need to see the lion of today. So the brain sifts out all that stuff exactly the same way, or in essence the same way, as a radio screens out all frequencies except for the one that you're dialed into on the radio dial, so that you just simply aren't listening to the other stations that are broadcasting. So what we actually have is images. And the reason you can have the past, present, and the future all existing simultaneously is because they're not bumping into one another, because they're just out of sync with one another with respect to frequency. You're resembling pictures. And so 10 years from now, you will have TVs that project holographic, through using of holograms in the center of your living room. Well, okay, but imagine you going into, or somebody going into that living room 10 years from now and seeing Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker in the living room and says, "What are they doing here? How could you have them? What are they doing here? Hey guys, what do you?" And you'd say, "No, don't worry. That's not Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia. That's just some frequencies interacting." And the person would say, "The heck with the frequencies. I see them right here." So the point is that this past, present, and the future not only exist simultaneously with the present, but are just out of sync with the present, but also multiple past, presents, and futures all exist simultaneously. And none of them bump into one another because they're all differing on the level of the combinations of frequencies that actually happen. And so what you actually have is all possible things that you can think of happen. Thus, we have a past in which all the major wars of the 20th century simply didn't happen, and the 20th century was peaceful. And you also have a past in which, say, World War II ended with nuclear destruction. So you have us, which is the history that we remember, some being somewhere in between that. But all those pasts actually happened. But you don't have trouble remote viewing the past because the person who picks the target is picking the target from his or her memory stream. So they know historically which past they want to pick it from. They want to pick the past in which the Titanic sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So that's the past that they pick out. So there's no ambiguity about that. But when you're picking something from the future, you don't know that. So you can say, what's the future going to look like a year from now? But you don't have anybody out there who's got it in their history stream, so that you can get absolutely anything. So remote viewing the future has always been the big bugaboo. It has always been the big difficulty.
Big bugaboo.
Yeah, the big thing that's the big mystery that it's so hard to do it. And so many people like to say, if you can remote view, tell me what's going to happen tomorrow, or tell me what's going to happen in a year, prove it that way. And they don't understand that they're being absolute idiots because they're assuming the remote viewing phenomenon is simple. they're assuming that, to prove remote viewing, you've got to predict the future. Well, that's stupid. You can't go up to a physicist and say, you tell me there's such a thing called a quark. Well, I've never seen a quark. If you're going to show me that there's a quark, you bring the quark to my house tomorrow. I want to see the quark. And the physicist will say, what are you, some type of idiot or something? You don't do it like that. You have to have an experimental design with the proper equipment and everything done, and then you have to look at the data and so on. So if you want to remote view the future, we have figured out a way to do it perfectly. How do you do it? There's one experimental design only that we have figured out how to do it. So that one experimental design is where you do the sessions first, and there is no target. You just have everybody do their sessions. You encrypt the results, put them up on the web, let everybody in the world download them, and then you wait for a period of time, and then after some period of time, say 1 or 2 months, you let somebody that's appropriately trained and authorized pick a target, and the target has to be a target. It can be anything that happened in the world, but it has to be after the remote viewers did their sessions, but before the person who picked the target did it. So, for example, if you do the sessions in January, and then you wait until March for a person to pick a target, well, that person has to pick a target from the month of February. February is after January when the sessions were done, but it's before the person who picks a target. So for that person who picks a target, the February target will be in their past, so it'll be in their time stream. But it will still be in the future of when the remote viewers did their sessions. Under those conditions, the remote viewing will work perfectly, as easily and as accurately as if you're remote viewing a past target, like looking at the Great Pyramid of Giza and how it was being constructed. So that's the way it is. So remote viewing is not a simple thing. So whenever you hear anybody say, look, if you want to prove remote viewing works, predict tomorrow's whatever, or predict something in a year, just look at them and say, okay, be that way, you're a blankety-blank idiot. You don't know anything about the science of remote viewing, and what you're asking is stupid, but you don't even know it's stupid. That's because there's nothing you can deal with. That person just... You can try to explain it, but if they're being so obstinate to raise that type of a barrier to the learning process, they're probably not going to listen to you anyway. So it's just not worth it. But the issue is we do understand a lot about remote viewing. It's relatively easy to remote view the past or something concurrent with the present. Remote viewing the future has always been a problem. We have lots of experiments doing that, but it's getting the details right for something that's in the future has always been a problem. So if you hear anybody say they've got a program where they've remote viewed something that's going to happen in the future, and they're making a prediction, just laugh. At very best, if it's a big event, there may be some indication. We've done this experiment. We did it actually with an earthquake. We've done it with climate change. And we've done it with a couple other things. If it's a big event and the remote viewing is done appropriately and you're seeing something in the future, say 6 months to 5 years out into the future, if it's a big event, you're almost certainly going to see evidence of something like that event happening. But the details will be remarkably different. For example, we did an earthquake study with regard to an earthquake that was perceived in the Los Angeles area. And we did, in advance, we did a probability curve for when the earthquake was supposed to hit. And it was supposed to be a devastating earthquake according to the remote viewing data. And lo and behold, and it was supposed to be 6 months in advance, but so on. We predicted it for a particular time during a month. And we got the timing exactly correct. On almost the exact moment when we said there was going to be an earthquake, there was indeed a 5.8 earthquake in Los Angeles. But the data that we had for remote viewing was much more devastating than that. But a 5.8 magnitude earthquake was not insignificant. It was very important. It really shook up Los Angeles, and in fact it shut down it rattled people in Los Angeles so much the entire cell phone network collapsed. The point is, however, that the details were wrong. So in a context of multiple realities, there was a version of Los Angeles that was absolutely devastated. And there were probably other versions of Los Angeles that hardly experienced anything. And we experienced something where there was a large shocker, but not something that, destroyed Los Angeles. So there was evidence that what we perceived did in fact happen, but the details were wrong. That's the typical type of thing you get with remote viewing the future, when it's done correctly.
I think we lost you again, Courtney. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just finished a...
Okay.
I just didn't want to keep on talking.
No problem. And I really want to... Go ahead.
I'm a professor for a living, so talking is something I do naturally, so you really are better off being warned you should just interrupt me.
Okay. Well, I really wanted... There's been some great questions from the chat room, and I know you've answered this next particular question before because I've followed your work and followed your page, but my editor and graphic artist is asking about the missing plane.
Yes. We don't do current event targets for a couple reasons. Almost always when we do a project, it always takes months to do. We're involved in one now, and hopefully the results will be out in 2 to 3 months. Actually, more like 3 months. But the issue is that when we do projects, they take sort of a long time for us to do, but we do them correctly. We do them well, and when we do them, usually the answers for current event projects are out using normal means before we finish the project. So we end up doing something, if it's a current event project, that's sort of useless because people have already found the plane by that time. The other reason we don't do current event targets is we don't want the remote viewers to ever do a session thinking that they might know what the target is. If they thought that we were doing current event targets from time to time, then if there was a big event in terms of current events, they would start their session saying, oh, this has got to be the plane, the Malaysian plane. And that would sort of screw up their entire remote viewing stuff. So we simply stay away from current event targets. We can do the Malaysian plane as a target, but if we did it, we'd probably wait 5 years or 10 years before we actually did it. If it's still a mystery 5 or 10 years from now, we may do it. But we don't do it when it's a current event. We wait until...
You have a lot of ongoing projects too, don't you?
We have usually at least one project ongoing almost all the time. We have another one in the works, and hopefully 3 months from now it'll be out. But the one that we just released, the Great Pyramid of Giza, that took us a year to do from start to finish.
Rand, do you have a question before we get into the next topic?
No, not offhand.
Okay.
He's so good, he just answers everything as I think of it, so.
Yeah, let's get to the good stuff now, Courtney. I want to talk about the
once we get on the pyramid.
I want to tell people what happened.
Yeah, the Great Pyramid of Giza was important for 2 reasons. We already covered the reason why it was important on the level of remote viewing, because of the way it was done so people can actually see it. There are 2 types of data. Data that are verifiable, and that means you know what the data are supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like really good descriptions of the pyramid, and you know what the pyramid looks like. So the data that are supposed to come in is supposed to look exactly like that. So those are like verifiable elements in the data. And then there's new elements of the data, stuff that we don't know. So what we do is we look to see if the verifiable components are spot on, really accurate. And then if they're really accurate, we say, well, if the remote viewer was doing so great with the verifiable components, the believability factor of the new stuff is actually raised quite a bit. So with these 2 viewers, these are the best of the best. The verifiable components were better than spot on. I mean, they were great. And so you actually this is one of the reasons. By the way, we have an announcement video that's available on our website at www.farsight.org, F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T. And it's 40 minutes, and it's .org because we're a nonprofit. It's 40-minute video, and it's got 20 minutes of the full documentary in it. The full documentary is about 1 hour and 3/4, hour and 45 minutes. But the announcement video has a good 20 minutes of it in there, and you can actually see some of the verifiable descriptions that both Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier are doing. And then actually, since we're at this point, if I can make sort of an important mention here, we are a nonprofit, and we have no resources to pay for advertising. So when we do something, we don't have a way to wave it in front of people's faces and say we've got something new out. So the only way we have to get a hold of people to let them know what we're doing is our free newsletter. And so if you go to our website, www.farsight.org, that's FARSIGHT, like seeing far.org, O-R-G, and at the bottom of the nav bar on the left, you'll see a banner there saying subscribe to our free newsletter. If you can just click on that and put in your email address, we send it out about once a week often with a cartoon from the celebrated cartoonist Vic Guiza. So you get a little bit of entertainment, remote viewing entertainment, as well as updates on what we're doing. Then you will get the information when we announce these new projects, because there's no other way we can get to people. So sign up for the free newsletter if you can. And then watch that video, the 40-minute announcement video. And the issue is that with the Great Pyramid of Giza, that was a project that I designed beginning of 2013 that was designed to understand how those pyramids were built. Now, I actually went into this project thinking that we'd find some reasonable explanation for how the Great Pyramids were built that sort of matched what some of the mainstream archaeologists were talking about. Meaning I was not dismissing mainstream archaeological thought at the time I started this project. Boy, was I in for a shocker. So when Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier started to send in their sessions, then I started to really re-examine what mainstream archaeologists were saying about how the Great Pyramid of Giza and the other pyramids were built. And I realized how ridiculous what the stuff is that they were saying, and that the stuff that we actually got back was very reasonable, and the stuff that they were saying was just totally absurd. So the mainstream understanding of how the Great Pyramids of Giza is basically what you call a cut and haul approach, meaning that the rocks were cut out of a quarry and hauled to the site and installed. Well, you know, we're talking 80-ton stone blocks of granite. Those are the largest ones. They're the size of a school bus or bigger. And the other blocks are made of limestone, and they're many tons as well. So, but with regard to the largest stone blocks, like the 80-ton granite stone blocks, they were cut out of the quarries in Aswan, which is like 500 miles or 800 kilometers south of Giza. And the mainstream archaeologists are actually saying that what they did was they chipped away at those rocks from the quarry walls with their hammers and chisels. And back in those days, they only had copper. We didn't have bronze. They didn't even have bronze back then, and copper's soft. So they chipped away and they made a crack in the rock. And then they said they put wood chips. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to not laugh when I think about it now. But they put wood chips in the cracks, and then they sprayed water on the wood chips, and the wood chips swelled up, and it cracked those big 80-ton stone rocks out of the quarry walls. Now, you know, if you actually think you can do that, you go to any place where you see some big rocks, find a crack and put some wood chips in there, and then pour your canteen on it, and you tell me
you don't even have the machinery now that can cut that.
It's so stupid to say that when you cut 80-ton stone blocks, you have to not only cut the four sides, but you have to slice them on the top and slice them on the bottom. You can't slice an 80-ton stone block on the bottom by putting in a wood chip. I don't know where to begin. And then the workmanship is not shoddy. When those things are assembled on the pyramid, you can't even put a human hair in between the sides. It is absolutely perfect workmanship. And the mainstream archaeologists are saying they took those big stone blocks and they lifted them up and put them onto logs and rolled them to the river. Well, how the heck did they lift them up and put them on the logs in the first place? And then you can't roll those things on logs. The logs that sink right into the sand. It's 80 tons on top of them. And then the second thing they said, they put them on reed or wooden boats. Oh, give me a break. You put one of those things on a reed or wooden boat, it would go plop right into the bottom of the Nile in a second. I mean, the whole story falls apart completely when you sort of just really think about what they're actually saying. And what we found out, and this is all mixed in with totally verifiable components, so the believability is very high, is that there was actually extraterrestrial involvement in this. Now, let me tell you that we have never given these viewers, any viewers at the Farsight Institute, in recent memory, extraterrestrial targets. The reason is that we've had some members of the board are some of the military guys, such as Lynn Buchanan and Glenn Wheaton, and they didn't want any extraterrestrial targets. They were very opposed to anything dealing with extraterrestrial stuff. And so we never gave any of these viewers any extraterrestrial targets. And we were not expecting any extraterrestrial content to come in. And the viewers were the most surprised of all when they started to describe extraterrestrials, because they said, this is a Farsight project. What the heck are extraterrestrials doing here?
Well, let's break that down a little bit for the audience.
Yeah.
Visual.
What's that?
Let's break down what they saw so the audience can get a visual.
Well, actually what they did was, let's start with Dick Elgar. He was describing not only the pyramid, but also the mining. That was one of the targets, the mining of the biggest stone blocks. And he found off-world, high-tech mining equipment that was energy-based, Star Wars-type energy-based, in the sense that they were slicing with like beams, slicing the rocks out of the quarry walls and producing liquid volcanism. So they were melting the sides of the rocks, and that's why the rocks are so smooth, following perfect sides. They were sliced with energy beams, and those energy beams are like lasers. They were razor sharp, but the problem is that they produced, whenever you have liquid volcanism, you have toxic fumes that would kill us. For example, you can't go to the top of a volcano and breathe in the fumes that are coming out of the volcano and survive. You have to have you have to actually have, oxygen in tanks in order to get near a volcano. And so what happened is that the miners that Dick found that were doing the mining were not normal humans like you and us. They were clones, and they were genetically manipulated, genetically engineered to be able to withstand the toxic environment better than you or I could do it.
Yes, they said that they had a face mask on that was like saran
wrap. In addition, they had some filtration and eye protection with a face mask. They also had very minimal intellectual capabilities. And these beings, Dick saw these people and said, what the heck is this? So he traced them back to where they were being made, and he found them as fetuses in like canisters, and there was an extraterrestrial overseer or caretaker sort of watching the crop. Now these beings, they could only withstand those conditions for so long. They could do it longer than you or I, but they became defective and then died, and then you needed a constant new crop of people to do that. And so this overseer or caretaker was, getting the new crop of people to do the mining. Now, the mining people were different from the assembly people. The assembly people who assembled the pyramid were like you and I. They were just normal humans. But the mining people were these genetically engineered clones. And this overseer that Dick Elgar found, he called her the praying mantis lady, and drew her very clearly.
Now, it's very interesting you say that, because I just had someone on the show. His name is Tom Reed, and he had a visit. When he had contact experience, one of them was a mantoid being, and the Hopi also had an ant-like being. So it's pretty fascinating that you guys saw that too.
Yeah, with a galaxy full of life, you're going to get all types of variations, and apparently, that's what this being was. Now, most extraterrestrials have telepathic abilities that are far exceeding those of humans. Humans are sort of the masters of limitations. We have the strongest levels of inhibitions and with regard to that. That's why so many people don't even know that remote viewing and telepathy exist, because of all of these limitations that are built in. But the extraterrestrial that Dick found was able to perceive him watching her. And we've known that for a long time. For example, a remote viewer can actually see another remote viewer at a target site. So she actually saw some image of him and recognized that he was watching her. And she was not pleased and basically told him to get the blankety-blank out of there.
Yes.
Yeah. She was amused that he could do that as a human, but, she said, it's none of your business. Get out of here. And the idea is that when we remote view, we essentially leave some element of ourselves at the target that's visible to on some level. And if you have a telepathically aware alien, then that person can, see it. Anyway, that was the first, to my knowledge, that was the first live interaction with an extraterrestrial ever caught on video. And it was certainly unexpected. And it was not staged. It just happened when the video camera was on. And so you can actually see Dick interacting with this, this being. So that alone is worth seeing. Anyway, and the other elements that we actually found is that the actual building of the pyramids was done in a society that was essentially a slave-master relationship that was essentially set up. It looks like it was set up by the extraterrestrials who were controlling it, sort of remote control, by manipulating the elite. And it looks as if I'm to connect the dots, that the entire construction of the pyramids was essentially a part of a large brainwashing type program, like a sham, because what happened was a tremendous amount of energy and effort was used to construct these pyramids, not just the one on Giza, but worldwide, and the remote viewing data clearly suggests this was a worldwide operation. And when you have all of this effort in building the pyramids, a lot of people died, a lot of people experienced great suffering. You say, to what end? Well, those pyramids are just useless piles of rock. I mean, you can't do anything with them, in the sense that they don't produce shelter. There's nothing, you can't, house lots of people in them. It's a very impractical structure. And it's built at tremendous cost. And it's almost like what happens when you go to a prison and you have the prison guards give you a sledgehammer and they say, go crack those rocks. And you crack those rocks all day, and at the end of the day, you're totally exhausted. You can't think about escape or revolt because you're just too tired. And then they combined this construction of the pyramids, using the pyramids to create essentially a light show, channeling energy across the planet through the various pyramids. And that actually apparently was done. And Dick Algar described that as like the Northern Lights times 100. It was a really powerful light show. But it didn't do anything. I mean, it wasn't like generating energy that would heat homes or anything. It was a light show, and it created a religion.
He said it was clean energy, too.
Yeah, but he said it was clean energy with respect to some of the mining operations to create sort of pits in the ground.
Or so down below, yes.
Yeah, but the idea with the pyramids is that you get something that looks like a laser show at a rock concert, and you get a belief system. So really what you get is humankind occupied in the construction process, and then afterwards you get a religion based out of it. So it looks from the surface, at least from my perspective, like brainwashing at its best. Now, when the pyramids were almost completely finished, most of them were finished, but some of them were not completed, another group of extraterrestrials arrived, a different group. Now, this group actually looked like you and I. And they were mostly men, but there were some women, and they arrived in ships from vast distances. And Daz Smith describes this. Pardon me?
Palladians, maybe?
I don't know, but they look just like you and I. And they arrived from in ships from vast distances, and Daz Smith describes that very clearly. And they disrupted the entire operation, apparently chasing the first group of extraterrestrials away. We have no evidence of a space battle, so we don't know what the first group of extraterrestrials went or where they are, or even if they're still around. But the point is that the second group essentially inserted new knowledge, new understanding, and some medical knowledge and also some other new knowledge, and the entire Egyptian society just simply melted away. And within 10 years, the whole thing was over and people gone. The people were gone. The whole thing was just evaporated and went away. And it actually sort of sounds a lot like the Exodus type of story. But the basic idea is that this second group was a benign group, actually trying to help out. And the first group was rather malevolent. That's what it seems like. And a control freak orientation. But the second group was sort of let's loosen this thing up and get rid of the first group type. And so I'm sure that the people of that day looked at the second group as gods, and they changed their behavior. Now, notice also that the architecture that evolved after that no longer looked like pyramids. We build boxes. We build skyscrapers. We build things that are hollow in the middle and have lots of shelter space, office space, things like that. And also, I want to reference a previous project that we did, the so-called Atlantis Project. And the Atlantis Project came out a couple of years back. But the interesting thing about, actually about a year and a half back, but the interesting thing about the Atlantis Project is that the finding was that there was a technologically advanced civilization on Earth about 70,000 years ago, and they destroyed themselves by doing reckless science where they drilled holes down near the New Zealand area, where that is the thinnest crust on the planet and the largest concentration of lava rock, and they drilled holes and essentially popped the balloon. We have an 8,000 diameter ball of liquid molten rock, and they were going after the heat, and they thought they could control it, and it didn't work. They popped the balloon, and wherever you get an explosion on one side, you get a dent on the other side, and that other side is called the antipode. And the antipode from that spot is exactly the anomaly, not approximately, but exactly the anomaly that we studied in the Atlantis Project, which was undersea ruins that are on the bottom of the ocean 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, 3 miles deep. That's the antipode of the explosion. And that means Europe extended at least 1,000 miles west of where it is now. And so that part simply sunk because of the explosion that happened on the other side of the planet. Well, the architecture that was existing 70,000 years ago was indistinguishable from our own, meaning when humans by their own selves design buildings, they look like the stuff that we have today. And so the Pyramid Project happened in between what happened 70,000 years ago and today. And the architecture was very different. So it's almost as if the extraterrestrials, the malevolent group that was actually getting us to build these pyramids, was trying to get us to think differently than we normally think, almost as if they were messing with our collective memory so that we wouldn't remember who we are, because it's not just the construction of the building, the pyramids, but the religion afterwards. It was a whole type of mind warp, brainwashing type of exercise. And that's, and this sort of hits some people sort of hard because everyone likes to think about the pyramids as the great mystery, the wondrous thing of the past. But if you look at it, it's the most obvious evidence of extraterrestrial involvement, and it's staring us right in the face. We can't build those things today. It's obvious that the people running around in loincloths and camels couldn't build them either. So it's obvious that if there was ever proof of extraterrestrial involvement, there it is. It's staring at us right in the face. And that happened in between a time when we had buildings like we have today and today where we have these buildings. So whatever happened some thousands of years ago when the buildings were constructed, when those pyramids were constructed, it is a real mystery. And those pyramids were designed to be a mystery. That's all they were ever designed to be. They were not designed to produce electricity that would heat homes, for shelter or anything. They were just a pile of rocks to be a mystery, to essentially control the human populace. And when the second group of extraterrestrials came around and chased the first group off, we asserted our own natural development. And here we are today, looking at those pyramids and trying to figure out what actually happened. Now we sort of know. And the one thing I really want to emphasize here is, for those people who may have doubts about what we've come up with, well, first of all, you have to look at the full documentary. You have to look at the verifiable components of the documentary, such as the Gaz Smith describing the blocks themselves, and Dick Algard and Gaz Smith describing the pyramid and drawing the pyramid and so on. And then you have to say, what about the data that we have on how the pyramids were actually built versus what mainstream archaeologists are saying, which is actually more reasonable given what we see on the ground today? And the answer is what mainstream archaeologists are saying is not at all reasonable. And what we were saying actually is. Now, the other major thing that we found was, and this is really clearly described by Daz Smith, is the actual movement of the blocks, how they were transported. They were not rolled on stupid logs, for God's sake, nor were they transported on boats. What happened was, now some of the small rocks may have eventually ended up on a boat, but the point is, the big rocks, the rocks in general were floated. They were levitated into place. Now, for those people who are rolling their eyes and say, oh gosh, levitation, just don't be that way. Go to YouTube and do a search for acoustic levitation.
Just research Coral Castle Code. That's all you have to do. Well,
actually,
really.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Let's not get into that. But we don't know how anything is done until we do a full project on it. So the thing is with the Pyramid of Giza, it's similar in the sense that it's a pyramid that's made of rocks, or it's a castle rather that's made of big rocks, and it's a mystery. But with regard to the Pyramid of Giza, do a search for acoustic levitation. You'll see lots of examples of how sound is used to lift objects and to move them even horizontally. Now, Daz Smith described this as the levitation process that lifted these big stone blocks 18 to 24 inches above the ground as sound plus. So it wasn't just sound, but sound was a part of it. In addition, we have other forms of levitation. We have the maglev trains in Japan, for example. Those trains that use magnetic levitation, they travel 200 miles an hour, and they don't touch a thing. They are levitated over the tracks. So we have forms of levitation today. And those trains in Japan are very comparable in size and weight to the large stone blocks. So we are actually, dealing with levitation today. So it is clear that some form of levitation, something involving sound, but also sound plus, it has something else with it, was used to lift the large stone blocks. And that the people did, in fact, have minimal clothing, dark skin. They were not using their physical force to move those blocks. They were guiding the blocks into place. They were manipulating them into place. It was an easy process to move them. Now, mainstream science basically is saying that this thing was done over a 20-year period, that one pyramid alone. Okay, if that's true, then you would have needed to have taken 12 of those big stone blocks, cut them into quarries, get them to Giza, and install them fully, 12 of them, every hour of every 24-hour day and night, for 20 years. Give me a break. There is no way you could do that with camels and, reed boats and wood boats. I mean, just give me a break. Those are 80-ton stone blocks. 12 of those suckers an hour, cut them, deliver them, and they're perfect workmanship. You can't even put a hair in between them.
Well, I have to tell you, Courtney, I know you don't want to talk about the Coral Castle Code, but I found something very relevant in Dick's video. When Dick was drawing, when they were moving the rocks, and Dick drew all those S's, all those little S's. Do you remember when he was drawing all the energy pattern? And it looked like a bunch of S's?
Yeah. Well, he called it like a heat wave, remember?
Well, let me just tell you, that is very intuitively, I got... And I don't know if you study John Depew any, but he has a symbol that he discovered for magnetic current, and it looks like an S with another S backwards, like two little scrolls, and that is very reminiscent of what Dick drew, and it just happens to be magnetic current. So I found that very intriguing that symbol actually looked like magnetic current.
Yeah, I don't want to discourage in the slightest any speculation along these lines. But the only thing I want to do, because, I think that's how we start. That's how great thinkers start and connecting the dots. I just want to make sure everybody understands that when I present information, I talk only about stuff that can be tied back directly to, through a sort of chain of command, the actual data that we actually did obtain. So, for example, a lot of people ask me to connect what we have here with not just Coral Castle, but also the large pyramids that are found in Russia, in former Yugoslavia, and actually in Peru and Mexico. And, you know, there's so obvious parallels. And, in fact, some of the remote viewing data collected here did suggest that it was clearly a worldwide project connected with pyramids elsewhere. But with respect to those specific other places, as much as I'm very tempted, and everyone's tempted, to sort of make direct comparisons, I really avoid doing that because I like people to appreciate the fact that I stick to just the data that we actually have. And when I do connect the dots and extrapolate a bit, I try to extrapolate just around the edges of where we are. For example, we don't have direct evidence in these data that the second group physically interacted with, or the second group of extraterrestrials physically interacted with or beat off the first group of extraterrestrials. But we did see the first group, and we did see the second group. And we saw the second group disrupting the activities that were on the ground. So it's a clear connection to say that the first group chased off the second group, even though we don't see a space battle. But you see, we see both parts, and so I'm connecting the dots, even though the direct interactions between the two groups were not observed.
Well, I think it's fascinating to connect people's work, like Brian Forrester. He just went to Egypt, and his work validates your work. You know, basically, there's a lot of dots connected, and I believe it was even Eric Dollar that said if you put an electric current or an electromagnetic field onto a rock, you can then change its shape. And I believe that has something to do with the crystal line structure that is in the rock. But go ahead.
Now, I don't want to challenge any of this stuff. I just like people to know that when they're listening to me, I try not to deviate from the actual data that we've gotten, even though I also wonder about these exact things you're raising.
Right. I just think it's very fascinating that so many things are getting connected now.
Yeah.
From everyone's research, it just seems to be like all connecting like one nice puzzle lately.
You know, I think what we're heading towards, and so now I'm qualifying what I'm saying by sort of announcing that I'm going to make a larger extrapolation. I think what we're heading towards is an understanding that absolutely nothing that we're taught about the history of mankind is taught in the university is correct, and that the whole thing is going to have to be rewritten from start to finish.
Let me correct myself. It was Daz that drew those little S marks.
Yes, he was the one who did that, and in
fact, about that.
Because he was talking about the levitation process and the sort of the cyclical currents that were surrounding the actual blocks. Yeah, he was the one who did that.
I know we touched on this a little earlier, but this is kind of in the same neighborhood. Since energy can be manipulated, coded, and directed, can you get a sense? Can you get a sense when there's a diversion or distraction in the field? Like if someone's trying to throw you off.
Explain this a little better.
It's just a question we have from one of our chat room people, and they wanted to know, like, if you can get a sense if someone's trying to mess up your data, like trying to distract you from your purpose.
I think I get you. Sort of, can someone disturb the remote viewing process so that you get the wrong results? Right. Oh, actually, that's very fascinating. And in fact, yes, it is possible to do that. And when we do public demonstrations of remote viewing, we have to design our projects in such a way that cannot be done. When we had a very early demonstration of remote viewing that didn't work so well, we had found out that while we were actually doing the demonstration, we were doing that process where we were trying to pick a target out of a list of 5, 1 correct and 4 decoys. And we found out that there was an actual group within the military that was assigned to help make this go astray so that it wouldn't be an effective demonstration. So what they were doing is we used to issue the same target coordinates, so these are the code numbers for the target. So this target was, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And everybody would be using those same code numbers to do their remote viewing sessions. And so all the remote viewers were sort of going out like a flock towards whatever that target was. And what we found out is that the military intelligence people had their same people go out like in a flock to a target, but they had actually found out which target was going to be chosen, and they had them all go to the wrong target, to a different one out of the list. And so, but basically what was happening was they would create like a glow around the wrong target, and our viewers that were sort of used to going out as a flock, sort of all converging on the same one, they'd see this activity around the other one and sort of get sucked into that one. So we had really good sessions, but it would be of the wrong target in the list. So the correct target would be target A, but the sessions would come back to be really spot on for target B, or C, or D, or whatever. And so we found that out. So what we did to stop that was to design when we do public demonstrations of remote viewing, we always have it so that the sessions are done first before there is a target. Meaning there is no target. There is no target pool. Meaning you just do the sessions. Then you encrypt them and you put them up on the web. You let and then be downloaded, around the world, tens of thousands of people, so on. And then you have somebody in the future who's assigned to this job pick a target. And so you can't have the military guys go out after the wrong target because the target doesn't exist because you're having somebody in the future do it. And then it's important to have the person in the future to be trained not to communicate with anybody, meaning the person can't communicate with his spouse or her spouse about anything. There can be no involvement with any other person. They have to do it totally isolated all by themselves, so that there's no sort of involvement with anybody that could sort of feed them on. For example, if the military wanted the target to be XYZ or something, then they could try to say, okay, let's get this information to that person and sort of say, by the way, let me help you with this target. Have a close friend or confidant go to the person and say, let me help you with this target. I've got a cool idea. And if the person who's supposed to design the target said, sure, what ideas do you have? That would corrupt the whole process. So we have to make sure that the person that's actually picking the target is in agreement with the process of total isolation. I don't care how trusted the person, this friend is, or your spouse is, or whatever. Nobody at all gets involved in the target selection except you. It's the person who's supposed to be doing it. Total isolation. And the person has to do it after all the sessions are done. And then we don't use the same target coordinates anymore, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each of the remote viewers pick their own target coordinates, so there's nothing assigned. So the only thing we give to the remote viewers is simply an email saying, there's a target, remote view it. And in fact, there is a target, but it's not determined till the future. So, and so we have sort of learned how to sort of get around those potential problems. But yes, it is possible to sort of
you do double-blind studies.
Yeah, well, actually we do. Actually, the stuff that we do typically is not double-blind, because double-blind is not good enough. Double-blind means that there's a target, but it's not known to the viewer, but also not known to anybody that's interacting with the viewer. But it is known. But it is known to somebody. So we don't do that. We do something better than that. We do sessions in which there is no target, period. It's not that the target doesn't exist, that the target isn't known to the viewer and is also not known to the people around the viewer, but it doesn't exist at all, period, at the time that the viewer is doing the session. Now that's not blind or double blind. That's way beyond double blind. So when people shout at us and say, yeah, but was this a double blind study? We just look at them and say, oh my God, another idiot that's never figured this stuff out. Look, how many times do we have to say the same thing? It is beyond double blind. Double blind simply means that the viewer doesn't know and anyone surrounding the viewer doesn't know what the target is. But we don't do that. We go beyond that. It's still possible, even in a double-blind study, for someone to trick those researchers and get the target information to the viewer. So we make it in such a way that the viewer and the target don't exist at the same time. The viewer does the session, and there is no target when the viewer is doing the sessions. Then you take the data, encrypt it using 256 military-grade encryption, put it up on the web, let the whole world download it, and then we wait. And somebody in the future will pick a target for it. And then we release the target, and we throw out the password to decrypt those sessions, and then compare the stuff. Katherine, that is way beyond double-blind.
Excellent. Courtney, when I was watching the video, I got a sense that they were not only using the ancient technology, but they were also using telepathy to move the stones and acting as one in unison with their mind.
We don't know what was the controlling mechanism, but we do know that the humans that were involved in manipulating those stone blocks into place once they were levitated up did not understand the technology.
Should have said telekinesis, pardon me.
Oh, yeah, telekinesis. Yeah, well, okay, that possibly is there. But let us just say that the data clearly indicate that the humans were using the technology but didn't understand it. So let us say that the extraterrestrials somehow got some elite to use the technology. I mean, obviously something mysterious was happening that everybody could see because the blocks were floating 18 to 24 inches above the ground. So obviously they saw something was happening. But let us say that the extraterrestrials got the elite to sort of point a staff, basically a staff controlling, perhaps holding some type of controller device at these big blocks. I mean, the humans on the scene would have just thought it was magic, but they saw the big staff pointing at those things, and off they went. So the remote viewers didn't describe such a thing, but they clearly described that this technology was being used and that the humans around the big blocks, knew that their job was to manipulate those things into place, but they did not know how those things worked. They did not know why, the technology involved. So, it's a question. It's a good question, but it looks like this technology may have been deployed in a way that the humans might have thought it was more magic than anything else.
It could have very well been. Courtney, could the pyramids have been renovated, so to speak, and used after the ETs left and all the people?
That's a very good question. A lot of people think
burial chambers after the fact, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's very likely. Now, there's one little wrinkle in all of this. There's a sarcophagus, which is essentially a big stone coffin, in the king's chamber, and it appears to be a little bigger than any of the passageways that lead to the king's chamber. So it seems that the sarcophagus was placed in there at the time that the pyramids were actually being constructed. If that's true, then that would indicate that when the pyramids were being constructed, the idea of putting a dead body in there, like a pharaoh's body, might have been part of the religion component that was raised when that was all done. But it doesn't mean that what was found in the pyramids when we excavated them with looking at that wasn't done after the fact. Meaning the pyramids could very easily have been used a few times, renovated and so on by pharaohs that came afterwards. So we really don't know exactly when they were built, and we don't know exactly by whom they were built, because the people who may have we may be associating the people who we think built it with the people who used it last. And while, archaeologists will tell you, it's clear who was doing what, when, and how, the reality is the archaeologists really haven't figured out anything with respect to the pyramids, let alone exactly who was doing what, where, and how. And you cannot carbon date a rock. So we don't know exactly when this was all done. But, the remote viewing data do seem to clearly suggest that the societies that were surrounding the construction process did look a lot like the pharaoh-type slave-master relationships that are described by the archaeologists. It's just that the exact people that the archaeologists talk about may not have been the exact people that actually built the thing. So there are questions, but it does seem to be. On this particular point, there seems to be overlap between what we discovered and what the mainstream archaeologists have been talking about.
Courtney, in your opinion, what is the most fascinating component to all of this?
Well, there are two. The first is the way the remote viewing was done itself, so that people can see on video the clear descriptions being done in a theatrically entertaining manner, so there can be no ambiguity anymore in anyone's mind that the remote viewing phenomenon is in fact real. So that's number one. The second thing is that there was, without any ambiguity, extensive extraterrestrial involvement in the construction process, both in terms of the mining. The mining could not have been done by by hammers and chisels. It just simply couldn't be done. Anybody who says it could be done by hammers and chisels and wood chips and water is just nuts. It could not have been done that way, and the transportation of the blocks could not have been done with camels and reed boats and wood boats and things like that. It was clearly extraterrestrial high technology that was involved. But the third thing that is really interesting is that the first group that actually were involved in the construction of the pyramids, definitely the first extraterrestrial group, definitely appeared to have been a malevolent group. And they seem to have been controlling society for their own purposes, both with excruciatingly painful processes of construction, leaving lots of death and misery, and following that up with the construction of a religion around it, and that whole thing fell apart when a second group of extraterrestrials came that apparently was in opposition to the first group and disbanded the whole efforts, and the whole society melted away within a period of 10 years. So that's the third most important element. So the first most important element is the way the remote viewing was done in the first place, eliminating the need for further debate about whether remote viewing is a real phenomenon. Secondly, that a malevolent group of extraterrestrials were involved in the construction process, and that's how the pyramids were actually built. And thirdly, a benevolent group of extraterrestrials, a different group, seemed to have come and ended whatever the process was that the first group was doing. So those three things are the three most important findings of this project. And by the way, the full documentary is available online as a video on demand for only $12 to rent, $15 to buy, and if people want to buy it as a DVD from Amazon, that's okay too. But I really encourage people to...
It's really great. I can't tell you. I was really impressed, Courtney, I have to tell you. I mean, just the amount of information and just getting to see it all and piece it together. I must have took 10 pages of notes, one with everything Daz said, and one with everything Dick said. And yeah. I was going to have Daz go on the show. I actually friended him, and I talked to him on Facebook a little bit, but he's in the UK. Yeah. And it's pretty fascinating that he said he's located about 240 missing persons. So that's pretty cool.
He's been heavily involved in criminal investigations.
Yeah, maybe in the future I'll have him on.
And missing person investigations for a long period of time, and quite successfully. And this has been, vastly under-recognized because police forces don't like to acknowledge that they use people like Daz for these types of things, but they in fact do. But the police forces are very hesitant for the public to know that, but in fact it does happen, and Daz has been someone who's done a sort of extensive work along those lines. But yeah, he's in the UK, and Dick Elgire is in Hawaii. Also, it's very interesting for people to know that they were on opposite ends of the planet when they were doing their sessions, and they did not communicate at all during the entire remote viewing process. So, in fact, there was a bit of a feud between them at the time. So, there was this tremendous overlap between their data is really quite remarkable. given the fact that they were only given an email, there's a target, go remote view it, and they had no contact with each other at all.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to rapid fire a couple questions at you. If you can answer them as quickly as you can, Courtney, I'd appreciate it, because Joe wants to get going.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat room by Tobias. He's wondering if you have considered the pyramids to be used as technology to focus on formative energies, i.e. chi or ki or gi, or i.e. chi, or to use it as a real power for technologies.
Well, clearly the pyramids, if you look at the full documentary, you'll clearly see that the pyramids were used to manipulate or channel energy of some type. And it ultimately was enough energy to produce a light show that was equivalent to something like a laser light show at a rock concert. But that doesn't mean they're particularly useful for that, meaning the pyramids were constructed at great cost in human suffering and lives, and they're essentially a useless pile of junk. So this question is coming out of the idea that they're a mystery that must have some mysterious use, and that's exactly what they were designed to do, to create a mystery. So I think the person who asked the question would like me to come up with a nice answer that sort of puts sort of a rosy, mysterious glow on the use of the pyramids. But I really don't want to do that, because the data really clearly suggests that they were used to manipulate the planet's populace in a very unpleasant and unfortunate way. And I'm really glad that the whole thing was disrupted eventually.
They could have used it for that purpose after the fact. Who knows? I do know Rand has a question. Rand?
Yeah, and Courtney, in terms of the Ukraine Crimea pyramid that they just discovered, and they're supposedly dating this thing back to the Jurassic period. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but if that is, that's 500 million years ago, which certainly Egyptians didn't build, and kind of begs the question that, what sentient life was building pyramids, which I think lends itself and validates a lot of what you're talking about. If that's true,
clearly there's been extraterrestrial involvement with this planet for a very long period of time. Do not expect the authorities to come out and disclose that. Remember, that's how I started this interview. Authorities do not do disclosure, period. So you don't expect them to say that. But clearly the evidence suggests, not just remote viewing evidence, but evidence from other sources, clearly indicates that the extraterrestrials not only have been here for a long time, but have been messing around with this planet for a long time. With respect to the age of that pyramid that you're talking about, the Crimea region and so on, you cannot carbon date rocks. So it's unclear if they really have a solid understanding of when those things were actually built. So let's just say they are thinking in the right direction, meaning they're thinking that these things were not just something recent, that they were like in the long distant past. And the next thing for them to start asking questions about is who the heck built them. I mean, if it clearly wasn't, if we were hunter-gatherers just a few thousand years ago, according to the party line, then how the heck were they built? So, I mean, they're asking the right questions, and the whole intellectual house of cards that we have about the origins of our society is very, very ripe at this point to collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it's untold, really, of what we have in the Arctic regions of our globe. I mean, who knows what is underneath of all that ice? So who knows what is the oldest pyramid, really?
You're really raising a very valid point. There's a lot of governmentally sponsored so-called scientific projects down in the Arctic regions, in the Antarctic region, rather. And, if you connect the dots actually, this is something we did cover in the previous project called the Atlantis, A True Story, because one of the targets was down in that area. All those government-supported projects, they're not looking for mastodon bones. What they're doing is looking for technology under the ice. And there's a lot of that stuff under the ice. But it's a very harsh environment, so it's hard to get it. But it's easier to get at than the stuff that's 3 miles deep under the Atlantic Ocean, 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal. So the ice, as harsh as it is easier than 3 miles of ocean. So,
one last question, Courtney, before we wrap it up. Do you think that we are still under some type of manipulation? Like in Egypt?
That is a really, really good question, because if you look at the Atlantis documentary, there is no indication that humans were as crazy as we are today. For example, look at the 20th century. We had World War I, we had World War II, then we had the Korean War, then we had the Vietnam War, and then we had Desert Storm, and then we had Al-Qaeda stuff with 9/11, then we had Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I mean, we are just crazy. I mean, something is like disturbing the nest. Think of it just like a bee's nest or an ant nest. It's like somebody's coming up and kicking us all the time. Either that or we're dysfunctional as a species. But if you look at the Atlantean documentary, there's no evidence in that there's constant wars. So it sort of looks like if there was a malevolent group of extraterrestrials that got us to build the pyramids in the first place, and a second group came along and chased them off, well, where the heck did the first group go? Now, what if you were actually in the first group? What would you have done if a second group came up and messed up your operation? Well, the next thing to do is go into a state of guerrilla warfare. Now, I'm totally connecting the dots and speculating at this point. But what do guerrilla warfare people do? They disrupt the society. They blow up things, terrorist-type events. So, you know, I'm sort of wondering, the skill set of that first group of extraterrestrials seems to have been manipulating the intellects of the human elite to create a slave-master type of relationship. Well, what if they couldn't do that anymore, but they still had the skill set of manipulating the human elite? Well, what could they do? Could they manipulate human elite to create these crazy wars? I mean, if you think about it, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, Al-Qaeda, the whole Korean conflict, World War II, I mean, the Nazis with the Holocaust, you know, and even the Vietnam War, which was essentially the stupidest war of all time, because that was essentially an independence movement in Vietnam, and we went after there to save them for democracy, and then the whole idea was we were not involved in democracy at all over there. In fact, before Vietnam War actually was full-blown, when the French were leaving, they had made an agreement to have internationally supervised elections as soon as the French got out. And it was the U.S. that went in afterwards and, you know, essentially sided with the dictator of South Vietnam in stopping the elections. So we were not defending democracy, and we acted in really stupid ways in Vietnam. And the real question is, why did we do that? So if you look at all the funny things that happened over the last... It just makes no sense. So I'm sort of wondering, and I have no data on this whatsoever, but if the first group of extraterrestrials was skilled at screwing around with the mental, you know, stuff of human elite, are they still doing it to get us to do these stupid stuff? Go into crazy ideas and make crazy conclusions? I mean, I don't know. But it's either that is happening or we are dysfunctional. and there's no evidence in the Atlantis documentary that we were that dysfunctional before. So I don't know the answer to that. It's a really good question, Catherine. I just don't know the answer to it.
Well, I want to let everybody know you have a lot of other experiments on your website. So please, everybody, check it out. We will be accompanying links underneath of our YouTube link once we upload it to YouTube. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Rand, for coming on the show with me tonight. It was great to have you back.
Oh, it's great to be back. Thanks, Kat. Thanks, Courtney. It was a great show.
Yes.
I really appreciated being invited here, so thank you guys.
Information is great.
Not a problem, Courtney. You're always a very good guest. I appreciate you coming back for a third time.
Well, we'll have another project in around 3 months, so there's more on the way.
Great. I hope I can keep going that long. If I can, you have another date.
Catherine, the world needs you. The world needs you. You and Rand, so hang in there.
Thank you very much. I'm trying my best. And I want to thank you again for coming on, Courtney.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
You're always a great guest with lots of fascinating information. I had so many questions we didn't even get to. But the audience members had a lot of great questions, too, tonight. I was really impressed.
Yeah, they really did. They were really sensible questions.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, everyone. I want to say thanks again to Courtney and Rand. And, of course, my artist, sound engineer, Neil, who is here recording the show every night for us. I really appreciate you all for being here. And I want to give a shout-out for something that the station owner, Joe, is attending. He asked me to plug something for him. He's going to be at a metaphysical conference, and it's called the Spirit Fest. And Joe said he's going to have a link for it on his website soon, I believe, or on his Facebook page. It's called Spirit Fest, and it's in Memphis, Tennessee, June 14th and 15th. So if anybody can get to that event or they live in the local area, check it out. Joe will be there, and I'm sure I'll be happy to meet you. Courtney, real quick, do you have any I didn't let you mention your books. So mention your books one time before we go.
Well, I have a variety of books, but we're running out of time, and I really would like to get people to just get to the website farsight.org and sign up for the newsletter. If there's any sort of take-home message, it's get that newsletter signed up so that we have ability to tell them about our future stuff. And secondly, to see the announcement video, which is right on our homepage. It's right at the top of our homepage, which sort of gives the overview of our whole new stuff. And we are moving towards a time when it looks like we're going to be coming out with, hopefully, a project a month, starting in about 2 months. We're trying to gear up to do that.
Great.
And so we've decided that in order to change this planet, we're going to have that type of ongoing process. So expect a lot of stuff in the near future. And for the meantime, sign up for that newsletter and watch the announcement video, and that's the way to start.
That's great. Yeah, everything is on your website. I just want to say thank you again to everybody that's here. It was a great show. It went so fast. It feels like we already been talking in half an hour, and it's gone already. And we even ran a little over, too. So that's definitely the markings of a good show. Okay, everyone. I would like to lastly quote Nikola Tesla and say, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. No truer words have really been spoken. This evening, our closing song is by Bass Fister. It's titled Third Eye. Hope you enjoy it. On behalf of myself and the Truth Connections team, thank you all very much for being here. Until next time, be safe, be good to each other. Peace.
In many of those taking substance D, a split between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain occurs, which results in a defect within both the percept and cognitive systems, although apparently the cognitive continues to function normally. Have you located the familiar object on this line drawing? It should just jump right out at you.